The text came in while I was wrapping a silk scarf around a mannequin, adjusting it just so for the afternoon rush. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a casual vibration that should have meant nothing, just another notification in the middle of my workday. But when I glanced at the screen, the words slammed into me like a wrecking ball. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. Haha? A laugh? A joke? As if gutting 12 years of marriage was some kind of punchline. I exhaled slowly, my fingers smoothing down the fabric on the mannequin as I forced myself to focus. Mrs. Peterson, one of my regulars, was still browsing the shelves behind me, running her fingers over the new shipment of Italian leather handbags. I could feel her eyes occasionally flick to me, waiting for my usual warm smile, my help in selecting the perfect gift for her daughter. My hands did not shake. My voice did not waver as I walked over to her, chatting easily about colors and textures, helping her decide between the navy blue and the emerald green. The only sign that my husband had just detonated our marriage with a single text message was the slight tightening around my eyes. When Mrs. Peterson finally made her choice, I wrapped the handbag in our signature silver packaging, thanked her for her business, and wished her a wonderful day. Only when the bell above the door chimed and she stepped out into the sunlit street did I allow myself a moment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering. I could have asked why. I could have begged. I could have broken down, thrown my phone across the room, screamed into the empty boutique. Instead, I typed 2 words, "Good luck." And then I locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and leaned against the counter, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Mark thought he had won. He thought he had played me for a fool, that I would be left sobbing on the floor, humiliated, broken, blindsided. But the truth was, I had seen this coming for months. The lies, the excuses, the disappearing money, the sudden obsession with his appearance. This wasn't a surprise. This was checkmate. I replayed the last year of my marriage in my mind, and suddenly, every red flag, every unanswered question, every gut instinct I had ignored came rushing to the surface. The late nights at the office that never reflected on his pay stub, the business trips with no itinerary, the gym memberships, the new clothes, the subtle but unmistakable scent of a different perfume clinging to him when he came home just a little too late. Then there were the smaller things, the way he kept his phone closer than ever, the change in passwords, the way he started calling me boring when I suggested dinner at our favorite restaurant, the one we used to love. It all pointed in one direction. 3 months ago, I had found the first solid piece of evidence, a receipt. It was sitting on the counter, half buried under a pile of mail, as if he had been in a rush, as if he had never considered I might pick it up and look. Dinner for 2, at a restaurant we had never been to, on a night he had sworn he was working late. I stared at the receipt for a long time before tucking it into my purse. And that night, I opened a separate bank account. A week later, Mark had come home with a new idea. "Babe, we should combine our finances. It'll be so much easier." He had smiled, charming, convincing, spinning some nonsense about how it was too much work to manage multiple accounts, how we could simplify things. I had smiled back. "You're right. That does sound easier." And the next day, I moved every dollar of my personal savings into the new account I had opened, leaving just enough in our joint account to keep up appearances. 2 months' worth of regular deposits, just enough that he wouldn't get suspicious. He thought he had drained everything, but the joke was on him. The next text came through as I was pouring myself a glass of wine, settling onto the couch in the home that, despite his many attempts, I had never put in his name. "Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Melissa, the 20-year-old receptionist from his office, the one I had met at the company Christmas party, the one who had laughed just a little too hard at his jokes, who had touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. Young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to think she was special. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved under "just in case," my lawyer. "It's time," I said simply. She didn't ask questions. She already knew. "The papers are ready. Do you want him served here or in Miami?" I sipped my wine, a slow smile forming as I imagined him and Melissa strutting through the airport, ready for their grand escape, only to be greeted with a very different kind of paperwork. "No rush," I said. "Let him think he's won first." My phone buzzed again. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." Little Shop. The boutique I had built from the ground up. The business that now made more than his middle management job ever had. He had always mocked it, always treated it like a hobby, like something to keep me entertained while he did real work. But tomorrow, while he was scrambling at the airport, trying to figure out why his first-class tickets were suddenly worthless, I would be at my little shop, running a successful business, living my life, and he would be just another mistake in my past. Mark and Melissa strolled into the airport that morning, their matching designer luggage rolling behind them, the ones he had probably bought with our money. They must have felt invincible, walking hand in hand, ready to start their new life. In Mark's mind, this was his grand victory. He had left his boring wife behind, drained the joint account, and was now off to Miami with a woman nearly half his age. He probably imagined me sobbing into a pillow, devastated, lost without him. What he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was how well I had played my hand. The first clue that something was wrong must have been at check-in. His credit card, the one he used to book their first-class flights, was declined. Confused, he must have tried again. Same result. Then, the airline staff politely informed him that their tickets were invalid, canceled. I could picture the confusion on his face, the dawning realization, the frustration boiling up as he scrambled to make sense of it all. Melissa, still young enough to believe in fairy tales, probably looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "What's happening, baby?" "What's wrong?" And then came the final blow. The hotel reservation, the luxury suite he had booked at the Royal Palm, also canceled. No refund, no room, no getaway. He must have been livid. Maybe he called the credit card company, demanding an explanation. Maybe he yelled at some poor airline employee. Maybe he even pulled Melissa aside, whispering heatedly, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. But no matter what he did, the outcome remained the same. They weren't going anywhere. Back home, I sat at my desk in the boutique, sipping my morning coffee, scrolling through my emails as orders from my thriving business rolled in. The Miami trip he had stolen from our shared finances? Gone. His triumphant escape? Ruined. And this was only the beginning. Mark's mother called me later that afternoon. I recognized the number instantly, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. "Claire, dear," she started, her voice tight, as if she had been holding back tears. "Mark told us everything. He says you're being vindictive, causing problems with his travel plans. Do you really think this is necessary?" I put the phone on speaker while adjusting the jewelry display in the boutique window. "Barbara," I said, not bothering to hide my amusement, "did he also tell you that he emptied our joint account? That he used our shared credit card to buy first-class tickets and a hotel room for himself and his little girlfriend?" Silence. Then, after a long pause, a hesitant, "Well, he mentioned there was some financial confusion." I laughed, shaking my head. "He committed fraud, Barbara. There's no confusion about that." Another silence. I could hear the mental wheels turning. Mark had spun some sob story, probably painted himself as the victim. But now, faced with reality, his mother was struggling to reconcile the son she thought she knew with the man who had just scammed his own wife. "He said you left him no choice," she finally muttered, the words weak, unsure. "That you had been distant." I picked up my phone again, unlocking it with a swipe. "Would you like me to read you his text messages, Barbara? The ones where he gloated about draining our account? Or maybe the one where he mocked my age?" More silence, then a quiet, defeated sigh. "He did seem a bit cruel." "A bit?" I echoed, arching a brow. "Barbara, he texted me, 'Ha-ha,' after stealing my money." Another sigh, this one heavier. "I told him that message was inappropriate," she admitted. I smirked. "How generous of you." There was nothing more to say. Mark had made his bed, and now he could lie in it, just not in a luxury Miami hotel. "I appreciate the call, Barbara," I said, already bored of the conversation, "but my lawyer has advised me to keep minimal contact with Mark and his family during the proceedings." That got her attention. "Proceedings?" she repeated, alarm creeping into her tone. "The divorce," I clarified, grabbing my planner and checking the date. "You know, the one your son forced into motion when he abandoned his wife via text message and ran off with a girl young enough to call him uncle?" The line went dead. I smiled. By Monday morning, Mark was officially served. His lawyer had been hastily hired over the weekend, someone probably recommended by a friend of a friend, someone Mark hoped would fix his mess and somehow make this all go away. That was wishful thinking. I arrived at the courthouse in a tailored black dress, heels clicking confidently on the marble floors. Mark was already there, wearing the new designer outfit he had bought for his fresh start, looking smug, probably still convinced he could charm his way through this. Melissa waited outside, not invited into the courtroom. I wondered if she knew yet just how deep of a hole her new boyfriend had dug himself into. My lawyer was cool, methodical, presenting our case with the efficiency of someone who had seen this kind of stupidity before. She laid out the facts. Mark had emptied our joint account with the intention of leaving me financially stranded. He had committed credit card fraud by using our shared card for a personal vacation with his mistress. He had knowingly hidden assets and made financial decisions without my consent. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and little patience, turned to Mark. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her tone unreadable, "do you deny these accusations?" Mark shifted in his seat, suddenly less confident. Technically, yes, I used the account, but... So, you admit to deliberately draining a joint account and using a shared credit card for personal expenses? His lawyer jumped in, trying to reframe things. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges some rash decisions, but we believe Mrs. Harrison's actions have been equally aggressive. She acted vindictively." My lawyer barely let him finish. "You mean prudently? My client legally protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of Mr. Harrison's financial misconduct. That's not vindictiveness. That's intelligence." The judge flipped through the documents in front of her. I watched as her lips pursed, as she absorbed Mark's own text messages, his own written confessions of theft and abandonment. "Mr. Harrison," she finally said, looking up, "you claimed in a text message that you emptied the joint account. You even included ha ha ha. Do you believe that makes it any less illegal?" Mark opened his mouth, closed it, shifted uncomfortably. The judge didn't wait for an answer. "All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. Mark's head snapped up. "But that money's gone." The judge didn't even blink. "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it." His lawyer looked exhausted. Melissa was waiting outside, oblivious. I stood, smoothing down my dress, collecting my things. This wasn't over yet. But Mark was already finished. Mark was unraveling. It started small, just a few frantic texts the morning after the court hearing. "You think you're so smart, but you won't win. This isn't over. I'll get what's mine. You'll regret being so cold about this. We can work something out." I didn't reply. I forwarded each message to my lawyer and went about my day. Meanwhile, word had begun to spread. Mark's Miami fairy tale had collapsed before it even began, and our mutual acquaintances, his colleagues, his friends, even his own family, were starting to hear the details. A week ago, he was strutting into work like a man reborn, a younger woman on his arm, bragging about finally living for himself. Now, he was humiliated, broke, and scrambling. The best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. His own arrogance had done all the work for me. Melissa was the first domino to fall. At first, she had seemed all in. Her social media still painted the picture of a whirlwind romance. She posted a blurry airport selfie with the caption, "Miami, here we come. Our new beginnings, our fresh start." That was before the canceled flights, before the invalidated hotel reservation, before they ended up stuck at a budget motel near the airport, the only place they could afford while Mark tried to figure out what the hell had just happened. The social media posts stopped. A day later, she posted something cryptic on her Instagram story. "Some people talk big, but have nothing to back it up." That was the beginning of the end. By the time I heard about it through mutual acquaintances, Melissa had gone home. Apparently, after just 3 days of watching Mark flounder, she realized the charming, older man she had fallen for was actually just a broke, angry middle-aged guy with a pile of excuses. She left him at the motel and went back to her roommate's apartment, ghosting him entirely. He had lost his girlfriend, his dream escape, his money, and then he lost his job. The HR department at his office had been watching. His relationship with Melissa hadn't gone unnoticed. There had been complaints. Employees had whispered. Emails had been exchanged. So when a formal investigation was opened into inappropriate relationships in the workplace, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. At first, he probably assumed it was just a slap on the wrist. But then came the news he wasn't expecting. The promotion he had been banking on, the one that was supposed to fund his new life, gone. It was given to someone else. Someone who hadn't used company time and resources to chase after a girl barely old enough to rent a car. Mark was furious. He claimed age discrimination. He claimed the company was punishing him for dating someone younger. HR's response? No, Mark. We're punishing you for being unprofessional. The irony was delicious. He had traded in his wife for a younger model. He had thrown away his stability for a fantasy. And now? He had nothing. His family turned on him next. First, it was Amanda, his younger sister. She had bought into his lies at first, had believed his sob story about how I had been controlling and how he had just wanted to be happy. But after she saw the texts, after she heard what really happened, she walked into my boutique one afternoon, a hesitant look on her face. I owe you an apology, she said, fingering the hem of her coat. I raised a brow. Oh? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. We believed him at first. I mean, he's our brother. He told us you were cold, that you never supported him, that he felt trapped. I stayed silent. But then we saw the texts, the way he bragged about draining your account, the way he mocked your age. That's not the brother I thought I knew. She exhaled, looking ashamed. We were wrong to take his side. I smiled, but I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't need to. She already knew. The next call came from his mother. The first time she called, she had tried to defend him. Now, she sounded exhausted. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she admitted, her voice heavy. He's still blaming everyone else. You, Melissa, his company. He won't take responsibility for anything. I listened, sipping my tea, not bothering to hide my amusement. We offered to help him get back on his feet, she continued. We told him he could move back in, temporarily, but all he does is sulk. He keeps talking about how unfair everything is. Mark's entire life fell apart because of his own decisions, Barbara, I said, matter of fact. She sighed. I know that. He doesn't. Not my problem. Not anymore. The boutique thrived. The local gossip surrounding my divorce had done wonders for business. Women came in specifically to support me. I heard about what happened. You're an inspiration, one woman said, while buying a handbag. Men like him never expect women like us to be smarter than them, another confided, while picking out a dress. The irony was beautiful. While Mark spiraled, my business was growing. New customers, more orders, a potential second location. Meanwhile, Mark, who once mocked my boutique, calling it your little shop, was now unemployed, single, and living in his childhood bedroom. And he was desperate. The text started up again, swinging wildly between anger and desperation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. We were just unhappy. This doesn't have to be ugly. We can work something out. That business would be nothing without my support. Each one, forwarded to my lawyer, let him dig his hole deeper. The final piece of gossip came through Amanda, who still occasionally checked in. Melissa has moved on, she told me. She's dating someone her own age now. I smirked. And Mark? I asked, already knowing the answer. Amanda hesitated, then finally said it. Still at home, still blaming everyone else. He's on dating apps, but, well, let's just say he's not exactly a catch anymore. Of course not. Women his own age, not interested in a 45-year-old man living with his parents. Younger women, they had heard the rumors. Melissa, once his biggest supporter, had warned her friends. His Miami dream, his fantasy, his fresh start, gone. And the best part? I never had to lift a finger. His own arrogance, his own stupidity had taken care of everything for me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. And I had never been better. The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of resilience, of independence, of everything Mark had underestimated about me. When he walked out of my life with that smug text, he thought he was writing the final chapter of my story. What he didn't realize was that he had set the stage for my greatest success. Within a year, my boutique expanded to a second location. Within 2 years, a third. By year 3, my brand was featured in a national magazine as one of the fastest-growing luxury boutiques in the region. And Mark? Still living with his parents, I rarely thought about him anymore. I was too busy thriving. But every now and then, his name would surface in conversation. Through mutual acquaintances, through whispers in the community, through his own family, who had finally given up defending him. "He's still trying to fight the settlement," my lawyer informed me one afternoon, amused. "Filed another petition last week. The judge dismissed it immediately." I laughed. Of course he had. Mark had lost, and his ego simply couldn't accept it. Oh, and he was ordered to pay court costs. Again? I smiled. It was the perfect ending. While he spent his time trying to undo the past, I was building my future. The boutique's success came with unexpected perks. Business networking events, speaking engagements, invitations to share my story, not about divorce, but about entrepreneurship, financial independence, and the importance of protecting what you build. It was at one of these events, a women's business conference, where I was asked a question that made me pause. A young woman, no older than 25, stood up during the Q&A. "My fiancé says I'm being paranoid for keeping my personal savings separate," she said hesitantly. "That marriage means sharing everything, but hearing your story makes me wonder if I should be more careful." I leaned forward, considering my words. "My ex-husband said the same thing," I told her, my voice even, "right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce." The room went silent, then nods, understanding, a collective moment of realization. "Protection isn't paranoia," I continued. "It's preparation. And if the person you're marrying truly respects you, they won't be afraid of you protecting yourself." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. And just like that, another woman had learned a lesson I had once learned the hard way. The boutique's 5th anniversary was a milestone worth celebrating. We hosted an elegant event, complete with champagne, a red carpet entrance, and an exclusive preview of our new designer handbag line. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at the guests, loyal customers, business partners, employees who had been with me since the beginning. This was my legacy. Mark had once mocked my business, calling it your little shop. Now, it was an empire. And then, just as I was greeting a few longtime clients, I saw her. Mark's mother, dressed in a sleek navy dress, one she had clearly purchased from my store. I raised an eyebrow, but I wasn't surprised. She waited until the crowd thinned before approaching me. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, adjusting the strap of her handbag. "Another item from my boutique?" I smirked, the irony. "He's still talking about his glory days," she continued, shaking her head, still blaming everyone else for how things turned out. "He told me he lost everything in the divorce." I sipped my champagne. "He didn't lose everything. He threw it away." She sighed. "I think deep down he knows that, but he'll never admit it." "Not my problem," I said simply. She studied me for a moment, then let out a quiet chuckle. "You were always smarter than him. He just didn't see it." "His mistake," I said, setting down my glass. "Not mine." She nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine respect in her eyes. Not pity, not regret. Respect. And then, just like that, she was gone. Through mutual friends, I heard one last update about Mark. After years of failing to rebuild his life, he had finally moved out of his parents' house. Not to a luxury condo in Miami, not to the high life he had imagined, but to a tiny apartment over someone's garage. The successful, charming man, who once mocked me for being boring, was now a washed-up has-been scrolling dating apps, trying to convince younger women he was still worth their time. His once sharp appearance, gone. His grand escape, a joke. His fantasy life, dead. He had spent years waiting for a comeback. But the truth was, there was no comeback. There never would be. I framed his final text message, the one he sent the day he left me. "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." It hung in my office, right below a plaque that read, "Success is the best revenge." Because in the end, I won.